in the glittering world of five-star luxury, where fortunes are made and secrets are buried. Billionaire hotel magnate Adrian Blackwood thought he had it all. Control power, a life meticulously curated. But a chance encounter in the bustling hotel restaurant is about to shatter his perfectly constructed reality. A young waitress, a single mother named Isabella, works tirelessly, her daughter often in tow. A sweet, innocent girl named Mia. But when Adrian's eyes fall upon her, he sees more than just a guest's child. He sees his own reflection, the same piercing blue eyes, the same determined set of his jaw. A coincidence, he tries to believe so, until the day the little girl looks straight at him and utters a single, life-altering word. Dad. What happens next is a storm of buried truths and devastating consequences that will make you question everything you think you know about family love and betrayal. Stay with us as we unravel this incredible real-life drama. Adrian Blackwood lived a life sculpted from ambition and polished with success. At 38, he was the owner of the Blackwood Grand, a name synonymous with unparalleled luxury. The flagship hotel in New York City was a testament to his relentless drive, a towering monument of glass and steel that scraped the sky much like his own aspirations. His world was one of bespoke suits, multi-million-dollar deals, and a revolving door of beautiful women who were as drawn to his power as they were to his ruggedly handsome features. He had dark, almost black hair, perpetually styled to perfection, and eyes the color of a stormy sea, which could be as captivating as they were intimidating. His days were a meticulously orchestrated symphony of board meetings, investor calls, and property acquisitions. He moved through his opulent world with an air of detached confidence, a man who had everything he had ever wanted, or so he believed. Yet in the quiet moments when the city lights glittered like a sea of scattered diamonds below his penthouse apartment, a profound sense of emptiness would occasionally creep in. It was a fleeting feeling, one he would quickly dismiss with a glass of expensive scotch or the distraction of a new project. The Blackwood Grand was more than just a business to Adrian. It was his sanctuary, his kingdom. He knew every inch of it, from the gleaming marble floors of the lobby to the state-of-the-art kitchens that serviced the hotel's 3 Michelin-star restaurant, Aria. He often took his meals there, not just for the exquisite food, but to observe the seamless operation of his empire. He was a man who prided himself on knowing the minutiae of his business, the names of his top chefs, the vintage of the wine in his cellars. But he rarely noticed the faces of the hundreds of staff who worked tirelessly to maintain the illusion of perfection he had so carefully crafted. That was until he saw her. Isabella Rossi was a single mother in her late 20s, and her life was a world away from Adrian's. She had come to New York with dreams of being a dancer, but the harsh realities of city life had led her to the secure, if grueling, job of a waitress at Aria. She was a ghost in the grand machinery of the Blackwood Grand, her days a blur of taking orders, serving exquisite dishes she could never afford, and smiling politely at the wealthy patrons who barely registered her existence. Isabella was beautiful with warm olive skin and large, expressive brown eyes that held a hint of a long-lost dream. Her long, dark hair was always pulled back in a neat bun, a requirement of her uniform. She moved with a dancer's grace, a silent elegance that was often overlooked in the fast-paced environment of the restaurant. Her life was a constant juggle, a tightrope walk between her demanding job and her fierce, all-consuming love for her 5-year-old daughter Mia. Mia was Isabella's world. A bright, bubbly girl with a mop of unruly dark curls and eyes that were a startling, piercing shade of blue, a stark contrast to her mother's warm brown. Because Isabella couldn't afford consistent childcare, Mia often spent her afternoons in the staff break room, a small windowless space in the hotel's underbelly. She was a well-behaved child, content with her coloring books, and a small, worn-out teddy bear named Barnaby. The hotel staff adored her, sneaking her treats from the kitchen and cooing over her infectious giggle. Adrian had likely seen Isabella before, a fleeting face in a sea of employees. But one sweltering Tuesday afternoon in June, something was different. He had just concluded a tense negotiation with a group of Japanese investors and had decided to have a late lunch at Aria. The restaurant was quieter than usual, a lull before the evening rush. He was seated at his regular table, a secluded booth with a panoramic view of Central Park. He was engrossed in a financial report when a small voice pierced his concentration. "Mummy, can I have some apple juice?" Adrian looked up, his gaze drawn to the source of the voice. A little girl was standing by a nearby table, tugging at the apron of a waitress. The waitress, Isabella, turned and smiled down at her daughter, a smile so full of love it seemed to light up her tired face. "Of course, my love. Just a moment," she whispered, her voice a soothing melody. It was then that Adrian saw the girl's face clearly, and his world tilted on its axis. It was her eyes. They were an exact replica of his own. The same deep, stormy blue, a shade so distinctive he had never seen it on anyone else. He felt a jolt, a physical shock that ran through him. He stared at the child, his heart pounding in his chest. It had to be a coincidence, a trick of the light. But as he continued to watch, he saw more. The determined set of her small jaw, the way her brow furrowed in concentration as she watched her mother pour the juice. It was like looking at a miniature feminine version of himself. He couldn't tear his eyes away. He watched as Isabella handed the juice to her daughter, her hand gently stroking the girl's dark curls. Curls that were the same shade as his own. A cold, unsettling feeling began to creep up his spine. Who was this woman, and who was this child who looked at him with his own eyes? He signaled for the restaurant manager, a portly, perpetually flustered man named Mr. Dubois. "Who is that waitress?" Adrian asked, his voice low and strained, nodding discreetly in Isabella's direction. Mr. Dubois blinked, surprised by the question. Mr. Blackwood never inquired about the staff. "That's Isabella Rossi, sir. She's been with us for about 2 years. A very good worker. Reliable." "And the child?" Adrian pressed his gaze, still fixed on Mia. "Ah, that's her daughter Mia," Mr. Dubois said with a small, indulgent smile. "A sweet little thing. Her mother is a single parent, you see, and sometimes has to bring her to work. We try to be understanding." Adrian's mind was racing. Isabella Rossi. The name meant nothing to him. And yet the girl, the resemblance was uncanny. He tried to rationalize it. It was impossible. He was meticulous, careful. There were no loose ends in his life. He had always been in control. He watched Isabella as she moved through the restaurant, her movements fluid and efficient. He tried to recall if he had ever had any personal interaction with her. A fleeting dalliance. A one-night stand he had forgotten. His life before his meteoric rise to success had been different, less structured. But he couldn't recall anyone named Isabella. The unsettling feeling lingered long after he finished his meal. He returned to his penthouse, the image of the little girl, with his eyes burned into his memory. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city spread out before him like a conquered kingdom. But for the first time in a long time, Adrian Blackwood felt a crack in the foundations of his carefully constructed world. A crack that had been opened by a 5-year-old girl with his eyes. And he knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that he had to find out why. The first seeds of a storm had been sown, a storm that threatened to unravel everything he had built, everything he thought he knew about himself. And it all started with a little girl who looked just like him. The image of Mia, the little girl with his eyes, haunted Adrian for the rest of the day and into the sleepless night. He found himself unable to focus on the spreadsheets and market analyses that usually consumed him. His mind kept replaying the scene in the restaurant, the girl's innocent request for juice, her mother's loving smile, and those startlingly familiar blue eyes. The next morning, Adrian did something he hadn't done in years. He delegated his morning meetings to his COO, a sharp, ambitious woman named Victoria Vance. Victoria, with her perfectly coiffed blonde hair and her unwavering loyalty to the Blackwood brand, was taken aback by the unexpected change in his routine. Adrian was a man of habit of control. His sudden deviation was unsettling. "Is everything all right, Adrian?" she asked, her voice laced with professional concern. "Just a personal matter I need to attend to," he replied, his tone clipped, offering no further explanation. His personal matter was a discreet investigation. He couldn't shake the feeling of unease, the nagging question that had taken root in his mind. He contacted his personal security chief, a former Mossad agent named Ben Carter, a man whose loyalty was as unwavering as his discretion. "Ben, I need you to find out everything you can about a woman named Isabella Rossi." Adrian instructed, his voice low and serious as he spoke on the encrypted line. "She works as a waitress at Aria. I want to know everything. Her background, her history, her personal life, and her daughter, Mia. I need to know about the child's father." Ben, a man of few words, simply replied, "Consider it done." While Ben began his covert investigation, Adrian found himself drawn back to Aria. He started taking all his meals there, his eyes constantly scanning for Isabella and Mia. He would watch them from the corner of his eye, a strange mix of fascination and dread churning in his gut. He observed the easy affection between mother and daughter, the way Mia's face would light up whenever Isabella was near. There was a purity to their bond, a warmth that felt alien to his own sterile existence. He learned more about Isabella through observation than he ever thought possible. He saw the weariness in her eyes at the end of a long shift, the way she would sometimes massage her temples when she thought no one was looking. He saw her patience with demanding customers, her quiet dignity in a world that often overlooked her. And he saw the fierce, protective love she had for her daughter, a love that was as palpable as the expensive perfume that filled the air in his hotel. A few days later, Ben delivered his preliminary report. It was a slim file, but what it contained sent a fresh jolt through Adrian. Isabella Rossi, born in a small town in upstate New York, had moved to the city 6 years ago to pursue a scholarship at a prestigious dance academy. Her dream had been cut short by an unexpected pregnancy. She had dropped out of the academy and had been raising her daughter on her own ever since. The most jarring piece of information, however, was in the section about Mia's father. The space was blank. The birth certificate listed the father as unknown. Unknown. Adrian repeated, his voice tight as he spoke to Ben over the phone. "That's right," Ben confirmed. "No father listed. And from what I can gather, Isabella has never spoken of him. To anyone." The mystery deepened, and so did Adrian's obsession. He started to orchestrate chance encounters. One afternoon, as Isabella was leaving work with Mia, he arranged to be exiting the hotel at the same time. "Good evening," he said, his voice smoother than he intended, as he held the door open for them. Isabella looked up, startled. She recognized him, of course. Mr. Blackwood, the man whose name was on her paycheck. She had seen him in the restaurant countless times, a silent, imposing figure in his expensive suits. Mr. Blackwood, she said, her voice barely a whisper, a blush creeping up her cheeks. Thank you. Mia, holding her mother's hand, looked up at Adrian with those impossibly blue eyes. She didn't smile. She just stared at him with a child's unfiltered curiosity. Adrian's breath caught in his throat. Up close, the resemblance was even more undeniable. It was like looking at a ghost of his own childhood. You have a beautiful daughter, he said, his voice a little rougher than he would have liked. Thank you, sir, Isabella replied, her grip on Mia's hand tightening. She seemed nervous, intimidated. He was her boss, after all, a man who held her livelihood in his hands. The encounter was brief, but it left a lasting impression on both of them. For Isabella, it was a strange, unsettling moment. She had always been invisible to men like Adrian Blackwood. Why was he suddenly noticing her? For Adrian, it was a confirmation of his growing suspicion. There was a connection, a link he couldn't yet explain, but one he could feel in his bones. He started leaving extravagant tips for Isabella, far more than the standard 20%. He would send over expensive desserts to her and mere compliments of the chef. He told himself it was a way of easing his conscience, of helping a single mother who worked in his establishment. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. It was a way of inserting himself into their lives, of trying to get closer to the truth. Isabella was both grateful and wary of the sudden attention. The extra money was a godsend, a lifeline in her precarious financial situation. But she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. Why was the billionaire owner of the hotel suddenly taking such an interest in her? She confided in her best friend and fellow waitress, a cynical, street-smart New Yorker named Chloe. He's probably just got a thing for you, Izzy, Chloe said, as they shared a cigarette in the alley behind the hotel during their break. A rich guy's fleeting fantasy. Don't get your hopes up. It's not like that, Isabella insisted, though she wasn't entirely sure. He's different. He looks at Mia in a strange way. Maybe he wants to be a sugar daddy to you both, Chloe said with a shrug. You could do worse. Isabella winced. She didn't want a sugar daddy. She wanted a simple, stable life for her daughter. She had worked hard to create a safe, loving world for Mia, a world that was far removed from the complexities and deceptions of the rich and powerful. Adrian's investigation into Isabella's past continued. Ben dug deeper, looking for any connection, any overlap in their lives. He discovered that 6 years ago, around the time Isabella would have conceived Mia, Adrian had been a regular at a high-end nightclub in the meatpacking district, a place called Elysium. He had been celebrating a major business deal, a turning point in his career. He had been drinking, celebrating his victory. The details were hazy, lost in a fog of champagne and celebratory excess. Ben also discovered that Isabella, in her first year in New York, had worked as a cocktail waitress at Elysium. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, forming a picture that Adrian was both terrified and desperate to see. He remembered that night at Elysium, vaguely, a celebration that had spun out of control, a beautiful dark-haired girl with sad eyes, a dancer, she had told him. They had talked, laughed. He had been captivated by her quiet grace, a stark contrast to the loud, aggressive women who usually vied for his attention. He remembered a shared taxi, a clumsy fumbling for keys, a night that had been lost in the haze of 100 other nights just like it. Until now. Could Isabella, the quiet waitress from his restaurant, be the same girl from that night, the mother of the child with his eyes? The thought was a seismic shock, a tremor that threatened to bring his entire world crashing down. He had a daughter, a 5-year-old daughter he had never known, a daughter who was growing up in the shadow of his own empire, a stranger to him. The weight of this possibility was crushing. The emptiness he had so often felt in his penthouse apartment suddenly had a name. It was the absence of a child he had never known he had. The carefully constructed walls around his heart, the walls he had built to protect himself from emotional attachments, began to crumble. He knew he had to talk to her. He had to know the truth. But how? How do you approach a woman and ask if her child, the center of her universe, is also yours? How do you explain 6 years of silence, of ignorance? The stage was set for a confrontation, a collision of 2 worlds that had been running parallel for years. A collision that would be triggered by the innocent words of a little girl who was about to change everything. The storm was no longer on the horizon. It was here. And Adrian Blackwood, the man who thought he had everything under control, was about to be caught in its eye. The revelation that he and Isabella had crossed paths at Elysium 6 years ago consumed Adrian. The fragmented memories of that night began to coalesce, sharpened by the image of Mia's face. He remembered the girl's name now, a soft melodic sound whispered in the dimly lit chaos of the nightclub. Isabella. It was her. He was almost certain of it. The knowledge was a heavy burden, a mixture of guilt, regret, and a strange, burgeoning hope. A daughter. He had a daughter. The words echoed in the vast emptiness of his penthouse, filling the spaces that had once been occupied by ambition and a relentless pursuit of wealth. He knew he couldn't just confront her. The power imbalance was too great. He was her employer, a man whose word could change her life in an instant. He didn't want to frighten her. He needed her to trust him. He decided on a different approach. He would create an opportunity, a neutral space where they could talk without the formal constraints of their employer-employee relationship. The Blackwood Grand hosted an annual summer party for its staff and their families. It was a lavish affair held in the hotel's grand ballroom, a rare occasion where the lines between the upstairs and downstairs worlds of the hotel were blurred. Adrian usually made a brief perfunctory appearance, a king surveying his subjects before retreating to his own world. This year, however, he had a different plan. He made sure that a personal invitation was sent to Isabella, encouraging her to bring Mia. He even had his personal assistant, a woman who had been with him for years and knew him better than anyone. Add a handwritten note, "Mr. Blackwood would be delighted to see you and your daughter at the event." Isabella received the invitation with a mixture of surprise and suspicion. She had never attended the staff party before. She usually used the day off to spend some quality time with Mia, away from the opulence that served as a constant reminder of everything they didn't have. But the personal note from Mr. Blackwood was impossible to ignore. "What do you think it means?" she asked Chloe, holding the thick cream-colored card in her hand. "It means you're going," Chloe said, her eyes wide, "and you're going to wear that little black dress you never have an occasion for. This is your chance, Izzy. Don't blow it." Despite her reservations, Isabella decided to go. Mia was excited at the prospect of a party, her eyes sparkling with a child's innocent anticipation. Isabella found herself caught up in her daughter's excitement, a flicker of hope igniting within her. Maybe Chloe was right. Maybe this was a chance for something better. The night of the party, the grand ballroom was transformed into a fairy tale setting. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden glow on the laughing, chattering crowd. A live band played upbeat jazz, and tables overflowed with gourmet food and champagne. For one night, the hard-working staff of the Blackwood Grand were the guests of honor. Isabella felt out of place in her simple black dress, a stark contrast to the glittering gowns and sharp suits around her. She held Mia's hand tightly, her daughter's eyes wide with wonder at the magical scene. Adrian saw them the moment they walked in. He had been waiting, his heart pounding a nervous rhythm against his ribs. He watched as Isabella navigated the crowded room, a shy, uncertain smile on her face. He saw the way she looked at her daughter, her love for the child, a tangible thing. He took a deep breath and made his way towards them, his approach casual, his smile carefully practiced. "Isabella," he said, his voice warm. "I'm so glad you could make it." Isabella turned, startled. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice a little breathless. "Please call me Adrian," he said, his gaze shifting to Mia, who was hiding behind her mother's legs, peeking out at him with those curious blue eyes. "And you must be Mia," he said, crouching down to her level. "I've heard so much about you." Mia, usually shy with strangers, didn't cower. She stepped out from behind her mother, her gaze fixed on Adrian's face. She tilted her head, her brow furrowed in concentration, as if trying to solve a puzzle. Adrian's heart ached. He saw his own reflection in her small, serious face. He wanted to reach out to touch her, but he held back, afraid of scaring her away. He spent the next hour with them, a feat of social maneuvering that did not go unnoticed by his senior staff. He brought them drinks, champagne for Isabella, a Shirley Temple for Mia. He talked to Isabella about her life, her dreams of dancing, her love for her daughter. He was patient, gentle, a side of him that few people ever saw. Isabella found herself relaxing in his presence. He wasn't the intimidating, distant figure she had imagined. He was warm, attentive, and he seemed genuinely interested in her. For the first time, she allowed herself to hope that his intentions were good. The band started playing a slow song, and the dance floor filled with couples. Adrian turned to Isabella, a hopeful glint in his eyes. "May I have this dance?" he asked, his voice low. Isabella hesitated for a moment, then nodded, a shy smile gracing her lips. She left Mia with Chloe, who gave her a thumbs up and a knowing wink. As Adrian led her to the dance floor, a hush fell over the room. The sight of the billionaire hotel owner dancing with a waitress was a spectacle that no one had expected. Whispers rippled through the crowd, a mixture of envy, curiosity, and disapproval. Adrian was oblivious to the stares. He held Isabella in his arms, his hand resting on the small of her back. She was light, graceful, a natural dancer. They moved together in perfect harmony, as if they had been dancing together for years. "You're a beautiful dancer," he said, his voice a low murmur in her ear. "I used to dream of doing this for a living," she confessed, her voice filled with a hint of melancholy. "It's never too late to follow your dreams," he said, his gaze intense. They danced in silence for a while, lost in the music and the unexpected intimacy of the moment. For Adrian, it was a moment of profound clarity. He knew with absolute certainty that he wanted to be a part of her life, of Mia's life. He knew that he had to tell her the truth. But before he could find the words, fate intervened. Mia, who had been watching them from the sidelines, her small face a mixture of emotions, started to walk towards the dance floor. She weaved through the crowd of dancing couples, her eyes fixed on Adrian. Chloe, distracted by a conversation with another waitress, didn't notice her slip away. Mia reached the edge of the dance floor, her small form almost lost in the sea of adults. She stood there for a moment, her gaze locked on the man who was holding her mother in his arms, the man with the familiar blue eyes, and then in a voice that was clear and loud enough to cut through the music and the chatter, she said the word that would change everything. Dad. The word hung in the air, a fragile, hopeful question. The music seemed to stutter to a halt. The whispers died down, replaced by a stunned silence. Every head in the room turned towards the small girl on the edge of the dance floor. Isabella froze in Adrian's arms, her face draining of all color. She looked at Mia, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and terror. Adrian felt as if the air had been sucked out of his lungs. He looked from Mia's hopeful, questioning face to Isabella's pale, horrified one. The whisper he had been dreading and hoping for in equal measure had been spoken out loud, a thunderclap in the silent ballroom. The storm had broken, and in that moment, Adrian Blackwood knew that his life and the lives of Isabella and Mia would never be the same again. The carefully constructed walls of his world had not just been cracked. They had been shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. And in the ruins he was left to face the consequences of a past he had long forgotten, and a future he had never imagined. The silence that followed Mia's single devastating word was deafening. It stretched for an eternity, thick with the unasked questions and shocked stares of everyone in the ballroom. For Adrian, it felt as though the world had stopped spinning. He looked at Mia, her small face etched with a mixture of confusion and hope, and then at Isabella, whose eyes were wide with a terror he could feel in his own chest. Isabella was the first to break the spell. She pulled away from Adrian, as if she had been burned, her face a mask of panic. "Mia, no," she whispered, her voice trembling as she rushed to her daughter's side. She scooped Mia up into her arms, holding her tightly as if to shield her from the prying eyes of the crowd. He's not your daddy, sweetie." But the damage was done. The word hung in the air, an accusation and a revelation all at once. The whispers started again, this time more pointed, more venomous. The staff who had moments before been celebrating were now a sea of judgmental faces. They looked from the billionaire hotel owner to the humble waitress, their minds racing to connect the dots. Adrian stood frozen in the middle of the dance floor, the eyes of his entire staff on him. He felt a surge of anger at their judgment, at their whispers. But his anger was quickly overshadowed by a wave of protectiveness for Isabella and Mia. He strode towards them, his face a grim mask. "The party's over," he announced, his voice booming through the ballroom, silencing the whispers. "Thank you all for coming." His words were a clear dismissal, an order that no one dared to disobey. The band stopped playing, and the staff, with a mixture of reluctance and morbid curiosity, began to disperse their hushed conversations, following them out of the room. Victoria Vance, Adrian's COO, was one of the last to leave. She gave him a sharp, questioning look, her perfectly arched eyebrows raised in a mixture of concern and disapproval. Adrian met her gaze with a steely glare that dared her to ask the question that was on the tip of her tongue. She thought better of it, and left without a word. Soon, the grand ballroom was empty save for Adrian, Isabella, a crying Mia, and a bewildered Chloe. I should go," Isabella stammered, her voice thick with unshed tears. She couldn't look at Adrian. She was too ashamed, too terrified. "Isabella, wait," Adrian said, his voice softer now, pleading. "We need to talk. There's nothing to talk about," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She started to walk away, her steps quick and unsteady. "Please," Adrian said, his voice cracking with an emotion he rarely showed. "Don't run away from me." His plea stopped her in her tracks. She turned to face him, her eyes glistening with tears. "What do you want from me, Mr. Blackwood?" she asked, her voice a mixture of anger and despair. "Do you have any idea what you've done? My life, my daughter's life, it's all going to be turned upside down because of this." "I know," he said, his voice filled with a regret that was so profound it was almost a physical pain. "And I'm so sorry. But we can't ignore this. We can't pretend that she didn't say what she said." He took a step closer to her, his gaze gentle. "Isabella, I need to know the truth. Is she my daughter?" The question hung in the air between them, the culmination of weeks of suspicion and a lifetime of what-ifs. Isabella looked at him, her heart a battlefield of conflicting emotions. She had spent 6 years building a world for Mia, a world where the identity of her father was a closed chapter, a story she would never have to tell. But now the past had come back to haunt her in the form of a man she had tried so hard to forget. Tears streamed down her face as she finally broke the weight of her secret, too heavy to bear any longer. She nodded a small, almost imperceptible movement that changed everything. "Yes," she whispered the word, a choked sob. "Her name is Mia, and she is your daughter." Adrian felt as if the ground had fallen away from beneath his feet. He had suspected it had even prepared himself for it, but hearing the words spoken out loud was a shock to his system. He had a daughter. A daughter. The reality of it was overwhelming, a tidal wave of emotions that threatened to drown him. He looked at Mia, who had stopped crying and was now looking at him with wide, curious eyes. His daughter, his own flesh and blood. He felt a surge of love for her, so fierce, so powerful it took his breath away. He took another step closer, his hand trembling as he reached out to touch Mia's cheek. She didn't flinch. She leaned into his touch, her small hand reaching up to grasp his finger. "Why?" he asked Isabella, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Why didn't you tell me?" Isabella's face crumpled, and she began to sob, great racking sobs that shook her entire body. "I was scared," she cried, her voice muffled by her tears. "I was young, I had nothing. You, a rich, powerful man. I thought you would try to take her away from me. Or worse, that you wouldn't want her at all." Her words were a knife to his heart. He had been so wrapped up in his own world, so blinded by his own ambition, that he had never considered the consequences of his actions, the lives he had touched and then discarded. "I would never have done that," he said, his voice thick with a guilt that would haunt him for the rest of his life. I would have wanted to be her father." The raw emotion in his voice, the genuine pain in his eyes, chipped away at the wall of resentment and fear that Isabella had built around her heart. She saw not the powerful billionaire, but a man who was just as lost and overwhelmed as she was. The next few hours were a blur of tears, confessions, and tentative steps towards a future that was as uncertain as it was terrifying. They sat in the empty ballroom, the remnants of the party scattered around them like the wreckage of their former lives. Isabella told him everything about her struggles as a single mother, her fears for the future, her all-consuming love for their daughter. Adrian listened, his heart aching with a mixture of regret and a newfound sense of purpose. He had spent his life building an empire of glass and steel, but he had neglected to build a life. Now he had a chance to rectify that. He had a chance to be a father. He knew it wouldn't be easy. The scandal of a billionaire hotel owner fathering a child with one of his waitresses would be a media frenzy. His life and theirs would be scrutinized, dissected, and judged by the world. But for the first time in his life, Adrian didn't care about the world. He only cared about the woman and child in front of him. "I'm going to make this right," he vowed, his voice firm with a new resolve. "I'm going to be the father that Mia deserves, and I'm going to take care of you, Isabella. You won't have to struggle anymore." Isabella looked at him, her tear-filled eyes searching his for any sign of deception. She saw only sincerity, a raw, unguarded emotion that she had never seen in him before. A flicker of hope, fragile but persistent, began to grow in her heart. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of her world. Maybe it was the beginning of a new one. But as the first rays of dawn began to break through the ballroom windows, casting a long shadow over their small makeshift family, a new set of challenges was already on the horizon. The world was about to wake up to the biggest scandal to hit New York's high society in years. And there were people in Adrian's life, people with their own secrets and agendas, who would not be happy about this new development. The battle for their future had only just begun. The story of the billionaire and the waitress spread like wildfire through the city. By sunrise, it was the headline on every gossip blog and the lead story on every morning news show. "Blackwood's secret heir," the headline screamed, accompanied by grainy photos of Adrian, Isabella, and Mia at the party, their faces a mixture of shock and despair. The Blackwood Grand was besieged by reporters, their cameras and microphones a constant invasive presence. For Adrian, the media frenzy was a familiar annoyance, a byproduct of his wealth and success. But for Isabella, it was a nightmare. She was hounded, her privacy stripped away in an instant. Her small apartment building was surrounded by paparazzi, their flashes a constant blinding assault. She couldn't leave without being ambushed, her every move documented and dissected. Adrian acted quickly. He moved Isabella and Mia into a private suite at the Blackwood Grand, a gilded cage high above the city streets. He hired a team of security guards to protect them, to create a buffer between them and the ravenous media. But he knew that physical security was not enough. He had to control the narrative. He called a press conference, a move that his PR team advised against, but that he knew was necessary. He stood before a sea of cameras, his face a mask of calm composure, and he told the truth. "Yes, I have a daughter," he said, his voice firm and unwavering. "Her name is Mia, and she is the most important thing in my life. I have only just learned of her existence, and I am committed to being the father that she deserves. I ask that you respect our privacy as we navigate this new chapter in our lives." His statement was a masterclass in crisis management. It was honest, direct, and it left no room for speculation. He didn't shy away from the truth, but he also didn't offer up any salacious details. He presented himself as a man who had made a mistake, but was now determined to do the right thing. The public's reaction was mixed. Some saw him as a hero, a man who was stepping up to his responsibilities. Others saw him as a cad, a rich man who had taken advantage of a vulnerable woman. But Adrian didn't care about public opinion. He only cared about the opinions of two people, Isabella and Mia. Life in the hotel suite was a strange, surreal experience. They were surrounded by luxury, their every need catered to by a team of dedicated staff. But they were also prisoners, unable to escape the gilded cage that Adrian had built for them. Mia at first was delighted by her new surroundings. She had her own room filled with toys and books that she had only ever dreamed of. She had a personal chef who would make her anything she wanted, from Mickey Mouse pancakes to a 3-tiered chocolate cake. But soon the novelty wore off, and she began to miss her old life, her friends from the park, the simple routine that had been the anchor of her young life. Isabella, too, struggled to adjust. She was grateful for Adrian's protection for the financial security he offered, but she felt as if she had lost her identity. She was no longer Isabella Rossi, the hard-working single mother. She was now Adrian Blackwood's baby mama, a woman defined by her relationship to a powerful man. The tension between them was palpable. Adrian, in his own clumsy way, tried to bridge the gap. He would spend hours with Mia reading her stories, playing games trying to make up for 6 years of lost time. He was a natural father, his love for his daughter, evident in every interaction. With Isabella, he was more hesitant. He was afraid of pushing her too far, of making her feel as if he was trying to control her. He would bring her gifts, expensive jewelry, designer clothes, but they were a poor substitute for the emotional connection that was missing between them. "I don't want your money, Adrian," she told him one night after he had presented her with a diamond necklace that was worth more than she had ever earned in her life. I don't know what I want." "I know," he said, his voice filled with a frustration that mirrored her own. "I'm not good at this, Isabella. I don't know how to do this." Their tentative steps towards building a family were further complicated by the arrival of a new threat, one from within Adrian's own world. Victoria Vance, his COO, had been watching the situation with a hawk's eye. She was fiercely protective of the Blackwood brand, and she saw Isabella and Mia as a threat to its carefully cultivated image of sophistication and exclusivity. She had worked tirelessly for years to get to her position, and she was not about to let a waitress and her illegitimate child derail her own ambitions. She began a subtle campaign to undermine Isabella, to poison Adrian's mind against her. She would make snide remarks about Isabella's background, her lack of sophistication. She would accidentally leave tabloid magazines open to articles that painted Isabella in a negative light. "You have to be careful, Adrian," she would say, her voice laced with a feigned concern. "A woman like that, she's only after your money. You can't trust her." Adrian at first dismissed her words as jealousy, but Victoria was persistent, her whispers like a slow-acting poison. She began to plant seeds of doubt in his mind, to prey on his own insecurities. He had been a bachelor for so long, a man who had always kept his emotions in check. Was he really capable of this? Of being a father, a partner? Was Isabella really in love with him, or was she just a clever opportunist? The pressure began to take its toll on him. He became more withdrawn, more irritable. The easy rapport he had started to build with Isabella began to evaporate, replaced by a tense, guarded silence. Isabella felt the shift in him, the growing distance between them. She didn't know about Victoria's machinations, but she could feel Adrian pulling away. She began to doubt his intentions, to wonder if he was starting to regret his decision to bring them into his life. The final straw came in the form of a legal document, a custody agreement drafted by Adrian's team of high-powered lawyers. It was a cold, clinical document, filled with legal jargon and clauses that stripped Isabella of all her parental rights. It offered her a generous financial settlement, a lifetime of security in exchange for her silence and her disappearance from their lives. When Adrian presented it to her, his face a mask of grim determination, her world came crashing down. "What is this?" she asked, her voice trembling as she held the document in her hands. "It's a way to protect Mia," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "To give her a stable future." "A stable future without her mother?" she cried, her voice filled with a pain and betrayal that was so profound it was almost a physical blow. "This isn't about protecting Mia. This is about getting rid of me." "That's not true," he said, but his words lacked conviction. He couldn't meet her eyes. "I see what this is," she said, her voice dripping with a newfound bitterness. "Victoria was right about you. You're just a rich man who thinks he can buy and sell people. You don't care about me. You never did." She threw the document at him, her eyes blazing with a fire he had never seen before. "You can have your money," she said, her voice cold and hard. "I don't want it. But you will not take my daughter away from me." She turned and walked away, her back straight, her head held high. She was no longer the timid, scared waitress. She was a mother, fighting for her child, a woman who had been pushed too far. Adrian stood in the opulent suite, the custody agreement scattered at his feet like the ashes of his failed attempt at a family. He had made a terrible mistake, a miscalculation that had cost him the one thing he was starting to realize he wanted more than anything else in the world, a real family built on love and trust, not contracts and legal agreements. He had let Victoria's poison seep into his mind, had let his own fears and insecurities cloud his judgment. He had pushed away the one woman who had ever seen the real him, the man behind the billions. He knew in that moment that he had to fight for them. He had to win back Isabella's trust, to prove to her that he was not the man she thought he was. But it wouldn't be easy. The battle lines had been drawn, and he was about to face his toughest opponent, yet the woman he loved, a woman who now saw him as her enemy. The storm had not passed. It had just changed direction, and it was now raging within the walls of his own empire. The silence after their explosive fight was heavy with regret. Adrian was left in a state of self-inflicted misery, the pain in Isabella's eyes a constant reminder of his foolishness. He knew he had been manipulated by his ambitious COO Victoria, and had allowed his own fears to nearly destroy the one pure thing in his life. He had to act not with words, but with decisive proof that he had changed. His first move was swift and brutal. He called Victoria into his office, and without preamble fired her. "You tried to destroy my family," he stated, his voice like ice. "There is no place for you in this company." He watched unmoved as she was escorted from the building, a clear message that he would tolerate no threats to Isabella and Mia. His next action was for Isabella. He found her in the suite with Mia and tore the hideous custody agreement to pieces before her eyes. "I was a fool, Isabella," he said, his voice raw with an emotion he no longer hid. "I let fear and pride get the better of me. I don't want to buy my way into my daughter's life. I want to earn my place in yours. Please give me a chance to show you I can be the man you both deserve." He proposed a radical idea, a trip away from the gilded cage of the hotel, not to some luxury resort, but to her small hometown in upstate New York. He wanted to understand her world, to find a new beginning on neutral ground. Wary, but seeing a glimmer of true sincerity. And for Mia's sake, Isabella agreed. The trip was transformative. Away from the pressures of the city and his empire, Adrian shed his billionaire armor. Dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, he met Isabella's warm, down-to-earth parents, and even helped in their family bakery. He wasn't a mogul here. He was just a man trying to win back the trust of the woman he loved. He saw Isabella relax in her childhood home, saw the carefree woman she was, and fell for her all over again. The turning point came by a quiet lake as they watched Mia play. "I love you, Isabella," Adrian said, his voice earnest and clear. "I love our daughter, and I want to spend my life making up for my mistakes. I want to build a real life with you, based on love and trust, not money." Tears of joy, not sorrow, streamed down Isabella's face. "I love you too, Adrian," she whispered. They returned to New York, not as a scandal, but as a family. They bought a brownstone in a quiet neighborhood, creating a real home. Adrian restructured his work life, making his family the priority, and starting a foundation to help single mothers in Mia's name. Isabella, with his full support, rediscovered her passion for dance, enrolling in classes not for a career, but for the sheer joy of it. Their life wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real, built on the foundations of forgiveness and a hard-won love. They had weathered the storm and emerged on the other side, their journey as a family just beginning. And there you have it, the incredible, heart-stopping story of Adrian Blackwood and Isabella Rossi. A tale that proves that love can be found in the most unexpected of places, and that family is not just about blood, but about the choices we make and the forgiveness we offer. It's a story of second chances of redemption and of the enduring power of a father's love. What started as a moment of shocking recognition in a bustling hotel restaurant blossomed into a love story for the ages, a testament to the fact that even in a world of wealth and power, the heart wants what it wants. What did you think of Adrian's and Isabella's journey? Do you believe in second chances? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you were moved by this real-life drama, don't forget to hit that like button. Share this video with your friends and subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable stories that will touch your heart and leave you believing in the magic of the human connection. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.